I'm running a $200 Amazon gift card the entire month of July. All you have to do to enter is like this video, be subscribed, turn on your notifications, and leave a comment why you want to win it with your Twitter handle attached. I will announce the winner at the end of the month on Twitter. The 90s is really when the gaming industry started to explode. The growth of home consoles, stunning new graphics, the hardware was capable of more, and gaming was no longer just about high scores or quarters, but rather a true experience with your character. Now, some of these 90s games were so good, they still stand the test of time. What's up, guys? Jimmy here. Welcome to Chaos Top 10s. Today, we're doing something different. We are going to be counting down the top 10 30 best games of the 90s. There's just way too many great games in the 90s to condense it down to a top 10, so I decided to go all in and do a top 30. So show some love if you want to see more, maybe the 80s, maybe the 2000s, more top 20s, top 30s. You guys let me know. Turn on those notifications, turn that bell on, check the box, never miss a new gaming top 10 upload, and let's go. We've got a long ways to go. We're going to be counting down from 30. Kicking off this list, we have Sonic the Hedgehog and the introduction of the Blue Speedster. The first game was a massive success, blending insanely fast platforming with a cool ring mechanic in place of health. And not to mention, the soundtrack was pretty awesome. Seriously, the original Sonic games have arguably the best soundtracks ever to grace the Sega Genesis. This totally could have been higher, I know. At number 29, we have Duke Nukem 3D. It's time to kick ass and chew bubblegum, my friends, and I'm all out of gum. Hands down, the best Duke Nukem game ever. This was what everyone was hoping Duke Nukem Forever was going to be like. Basically a Doom clone with an extra element of hilarious writing and ludicrous situations. Duke Nukem 3D definitely pushed the line of what some said could be done in a video game. Girls, gore, and countless profanities made this game totally awesome. At number 28, we have Warcraft 2, Tides of Darkness. A lot of people forget that before there was a World of Warcraft, the series was simply called Warcraft. Well, Warcraft 2 was one that put the series on the map and is pretty much single-handedly responsible for birthing WoW a few years later. Warcraft 2 was an RTS game set in a fantasy world that drew millions of PC players in and made the series popular enough to experiment with an MMO. And you all know how that ended up. At number 27, we have Quake. While many point to Doom being the game that laid out how FPS games were meant to be played, Quake is the game that showed how FPS games were meant to be online. Quake was insane. Developed by the same team as Doom, Quake was rendered with full 3D visuals, allowing for a deeper gameplay and more detailed maps. If you enjoy online FPS games, you owe a lot of that enjoyment all the way back to Quake in 1996. Why haven't we gotten another Star Wars flight simulator game yet? Come on, answer me this. At number 26, we have Star Wars TIE Fighter. These were amazing. Star Wars TIE Fighter was part of the X-Wing series, but allowed you to take control of the Empire instead of the Rebellion, giving you a brand new perspective on the Galactic War with new ships, deeper mechanics, and improved visuals. This game was the closest we ever felt to piloting our own Star Wars ship, and honestly, no game to date has even come close to what Star Wars TIE Fighter had to offer back in '94. At number 25, we have Mario Kart 64. While Mario Kart 64 wasn't the first game in the series, it definitely is the one that made the series. Honestly, it did. Up until this point, the Mario Kart games were very simple, but still fun. However, when Mario Kart 64 was released in '96, everything changed. New items, tons of courses, awesome 3D graphics, and gameplay that paved the way for future titles. If you've never played Mario Kart 64, go get it. It is pretty much on every Nintendo Virtual Console, so you definitely have access to it, and you won't regret it. At number 24, we have Castlevania Symphony of the Night. One of the most unfortunately forgotten franchises in gaming history is Castlevania, although it does have a Netflix series coming out, I believe. Released for the PS1 in '97, Symphony of the Night was the first in the series to feature non-linear level design and had tons of hidden secrets. Many gamers even got so far to say that Symphony of the Night is the most secret-filled game of all time. The best game in the series, and one of the best games for PS1, Symphony of the Night definitely deserves a spot on this list. The title that put Epic Games on the map is our 23rd entry today in the form of Unreal Tournament. Redefined online shooters. I mean, it was amazing. It was released in '99 and blew people's minds. Great graphics, awesome weapons, fast-paced arena gameplay, and improving on just about every aspect of the FPS standards that Quake had established just 3 years earlier. Unreal definitely earns its spot in gaming history thanks to the excellent map design and the perfection of the first Unreal Engine, which we've seen updated time and time and time again over the years, and we've seen it used a ton in modern gaming. I think this is safe to say one of the best series of all time. Number 22, Metal Gear Solid. With the first game released all the way back in '98 for the PC and PS1, Konami had seriously changed the game and redefined the stealth genre, which was a genre that really flew under the radar in mainstream gaming. Metal Gear Solid was insanely innovative with its new mechanics, gameplay, software capabilities, and excellent level design. Metal Gear Solid was really the first truly cinematic game, as the developers wanted it to seem like you were playing a movie, and they did. They captured it. Man, I have some history with this one at number 21. StarCraft is kind of part of the origination story of my original name, Chaos X Silencer. After Warcraft 2 was released, work on a new project began over at Blizzard Studios. This sci-fi RTS took many of the elements gamers loved about Warcraft and expanded on them to make them fit in a new setting with a new cast of characters, new story, and one of the deepest RTS games ever released. StarCraft hit the shelves in '98 and was the best-selling PC game of that year. Okay, we've made it all the way to 20. Wolfenstein 3D. Before there was Doom, there was Wolfenstein, and believe it or not, Wolfenstein was actually a stealth series before 3D came out, and Wolfenstein 3D is the third game in the franchise. But when ID Software took over the license and developed Wolfenstein 3D, everything changed. The new game featured fast-paced FPS gameplay and super gory kills. Plus, not to mention, the final boss was Mecha Hitler. What other game has a Mecha Hitler? Wolfenstein 3D definitely helped popularize the FPS genre and gave ID Software the tools they would need to rock the world with Doom a few years later. At number 19, we have System Shock 2. Before BioShock, there was System Shock. Widely regarded as one of the scariest games ever made, and one of the best sci-fi RPGs ever made as well. System Shock 2 was released in '99 for the PC, and still holds up. You venture around a space station after an evil AI is taken over, and a horrific infection is taking control of many of the passengers. Sound familiar, right? The atmosphere is disturbing as hell, and the enemies send chills down your spine as they beg you to kill them and end their suffering at the hand of the infection. While it didn't sell very well, it was critically acclaimed, and years later, the spiritual successor BioShock was released and took command of the gaming industry. At number 18, we have the Blue Speedster again, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Everything the original Sonic game did, Sonic 2 did even better. Fast-paced platforming, a badass soundtrack, the introduction of Tails, and just an overall awesome game that could be played for hours and hours on end even today. Sonic 2 was even such a success that it caught the attention of Michael Jackson, who would go on to compose the music for Sonic 3. I think it's safe to say that this number 17 game is one of the most influential FPS games of all time. Half-Life. It was released in '98 and decided to take a step back from the fast-paced, bloody, badass gameplay of other FPS games of the time, and decided to focus more on the story and the characters as well as the physics, which were so deep and detailed that this went on to be one of the most technically advanced games of its time. The most realistic and detailed FPS of the decade, Half-Life was the best-selling PC shooter ever at the time. Okay, this is our first Rareware title on the list at number 16, Donkey Kong Country. It was released in 1994 for the Super NES and was DK's first solo outing. The game was just plain amazing. The platforming, the music, the characters. DK Country single-handedly saved the Super NES as it was starting to struggle against the Sega Genesis and the rise of Sonic the Hedgehog. DK Country went on to be regarded as one of the best platformers ever made and is the second best-selling SNES game of all time, only behind Super Mario World. Okay, we're halfway home. We've made it to the top 15. At number 15, we have the game Super Metroid. Released in 1994 for the Super NES, Super Metroid was really the game that redefined open-ended platforming games. All the time, most all platformers were linear and straightforward, but Super Metroid turned that style on its head and gave us our first taste of true open-world platforming hybrids. Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night went on to create the Metroidvania genre of platformers, which feature open non-linear level designs. Super Metroid was insanely popular, but unfortunately wasn't as much of a financial success as Mario and Zelda. It wouldn't get another sequel for 8 years when we finally got the release of Metroid Prime. Okay, at number 14, Pokemon is easily the biggest handheld series in gaming history, and we're going to talk about Pokemon Red and Blue. It all started with Red and Blue, released in '96 in Japan and '97 in North America. These games not only put the Pokemon series on the map, but was able to create a style of RPG that even the youngest of gamers could follow along. The open world, the concept of catching and training your Pokemon. This style of game had never been seen before, and the modern Pokemon games are still using this format just because it's so good. Red and Blue was remade as Fire Red and Leaf Green in 2004 with updated visuals and a larger roster of Pokemon to catch, as well as a multiplayer using the Game Boy Advance wireless adapter to play with your friends. At number 13, we have Spyro the Dragon. With the rise of 3D platforming, Sony wanted a piece of the action so they could compete with Nintendo on their new PlayStation. In 1998, Spyro the Dragon was released and featured some of the most beautiful graphics to date on the console. It was praised for its witty writing, great level design, and insane replay value thanks to all the hidden secrets around the game's world. It's a shame, though. Spyro has since been degraded to a side character in a Skylanders series because the original Spyro games are nothing short of masterpieces. At number 12, we have one of the longest running series ever in gaming history, Final Fantasy. We're going to go with Final Fantasy VII. Now, Final Fantasy first started all the way back in 1987, has been all over the place in terms of genre and game quality. Like most series, fans will argue on and on about which one is the best. There's not much debate over the best Final Fantasy game of the 90s, though. Final Fantasy VII was released in '97 for the PS1. It was called the best RPG ever made at the time, with much of the praise being pointed towards its incredibly deep gameplay, beautiful music, and stunning visuals. Never played it? Well, there's a remake coming sometime soon from Square Enix, and it's looking like one of the most beautiful games ever made. So your wait will soon be over if you never got to experience this masterpiece of a game. Okay, number 11. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. And where do I even start with this series? One of the longest running and most critically acclaimed franchises in gaming history is The Legend of Zelda, starting back in 1986 and is still going strong to this day with the recent release of Breath of the Wild. There are tons of debates over which game is the best in the series, but a heavy contender for that title would be this one. Released in '98 for the Nintendo 64 and is the best reviewed video game ever released, according to Guinness Book of World Records at least. Deep gameplay, great characters, and an amazing story that was surprisingly mature for the target audience, Ocarina of Time is nearly a flawless game. So I want to know from you guys, what is your favorite Zelda game of all time? All right, my friends, we have made it down to the top 10. Let me know if you are enjoying these top 30 lists. They're massive, but they're a lot of fun. All right, here we go. At number 10, Street Fighter II. And the first Street Fighter had pretty much been forgotten as it was incredibly basic. It only had 2 characters, although if we're being honest, it's probably the most balanced game ever made. But in '91, the series had a massive makeover with the arcade release of Street Fighter II: The World Warrior. Ever wonder why there's so many fighting games released in the early to mid-90s? Well, you have Street Fighter II to thank for that. Super smooth gameplay, an awesome character roster, and the later released Championship Edition and Super Street Fighter II Turbo that is still played competitively to this day. Street Fighter II is the best-selling and most important fighting game in history. It is. It really is. If you like fighting games, you owe Street Fighter II a huge fat thank you. At number 9, we have Banjo-Kazooie. Regarded by many to be Rare's finest creation, Banjo-Kazooie was released for the 64 in 1998 and was an instant classic. Drawing inspiration from Walt Disney Studios in an effort to appeal to all ages, Rare created an absolute masterpiece blending 3D platforming with exploration, collectibles, and witty writing and character design. Not to mention that Banjo-Kazooie is perhaps the best-looking N64 game ever when it was released, with the colors that popped and beautiful worlds to explore. If you've never played the original, pick up the Rare Replay Collection for the Xbox One and give it a try. Okay, we're getting into the gritty here, so not everything can be in a certain spot. Number 8, Super Smash Bros. This game was a huge risk for Nintendo, and it originally wasn't going to be made. A fighting game featuring Nintendo's lovable, family-friendly characters doesn't sound like a success. Lead designer Masahiro Sakurai really had to fight to get this game made, and even famously made a prototype of the game to present to Nintendo execs before the project was ever approved. The game was a massive success, as this is one of the first crossover games ever made, and who wouldn't want a game where you could have Mario, Pikachu, Kirby, and Fox McCloud all on screen at one time. Released in '99, Super Smash Bros. Went on to be one of the best-selling titles for the system. Still one of the scariest games ever made at number 7, Resident Evil. The original Resident Evil came out in 1996 for the PS1 and scared the crap out of just about everybody that played it. I remember it personally, the first time we saw a zombie in that game when he just kind of turned his head around. This game completely redefined the survival horror genre and is really to thank for all the great horror games to be released in the 90s and the 2000s, as the horror genre was yet to see major success in the gaming industry until we got Resident Evil. The creepy mansion, the terrifying zombies, the interesting and mysterious story, the revolutionary inventory and save systems, the great graphics. Resident Evil holds a well-deserved spot in gaming history for being one of the best and scariest games ever released for the PlayStation. This number 6 entry pissed off the world. Mortal Kombat single-handedly created the ESRB rating. Mortal Kombat first graced the arcades in '92 and took the world by storm with its smooth gameplay, awesome live-action sprites, and of course, the excessive blood and gore that had never been seen in an arcade machine. Many make the mistake of thinking the first Mortal Kombat existed on controversy alone, but no, the game was awesome to this day. The original MK has super smooth fighting and surprisingly deep mechanics. Sure, later games refined the first technical shortcomings, but that doesn't mean the first isn't great, because it definitely was. Alright, we made it down to 5. At number 5, Super Mario World, and regarded by many to be the best 2D platforming game ever made, Super Mario World was released in '90 in Japan and the following year in North America. The fourth game in the Mario series, Super Mario World was a launch title for the Super Nintendo and one of the best reviewed Nintendo games ever. It has beautiful music, awesome gameplay mechanics, and introduced the world to Yoshi, who is now one of the main characters in the Mario universe. Well deserving of a top 5 spot on this list. At number 4, oh yes, remember how we mentioned Wolfenstein 3D repopularized the FPS genre? Well, Doom made the genre completely explode, going on to be one of the best-selling, most copied, and most important video games ever created. Released all the way back in '93, you played as the unnamed Space Marine, who would go on to be known as Doom Guy, as he brutally fought off invading demons from hell. The gameplay was extremely fast-paced and bloody, with excellent non-linear level design and awesome gunplay mechanics. The game is just plain awesome. If you enjoyed the reboot, or you enjoy the FPS games in general, you owe it to yourself to go play this original game at least once. You knew there was going to be a bevy of Mario games toward the top, and at number 3 is no different. Super Mario 64. Widely regarded as the best 3D platformer ever made, and perhaps Nintendo's finest creation, Super Mario 64 completely changed the franchise and the gaming industry as a whole. The game managed to take the linear 2D style of Mario and seamlessly translate it into a third dimension. Excellent music, great visuals, endless replayability. Super Mario 64 was met with critical acclaim and is the best-selling N64 game of all time. Super Mario 64 also left a hefty impact on the technical side of the gaming industry, as it was the first game ever to feature a full 360-degree camera, which would go on to be a staple of just about every third-person non-shooter video game, and to this day. Super Mario 64 is still one of the most played games in the speedrunning community, as 21 years have passed since it was released, and gamers are still finding new ways to play this game. Alright, my friends, we've reached the final 2. This could have went either way. At number 2, we have GoldenEye 007. Oh man, so many memories with this game. GoldenEye was developed by Rareware and released in '97 and is marked as one of the most important shooters ever made. While Wolfenstein 3D made the genre popular again and Doom created the successful formula for it, GoldenEye marked the transition into a more realistic setting, as well as proving that shooters could be popular on consoles as opposed to just PC, as the main selling point of the game was its 4-player split-screen multiplayer modes. It would go on to sell 8 million copies, making it the third best-selling Nintendo 64 game ever, and left a hefty impact on the gaming industry, as it was the first game to feature both a solid single-player and multiplayer, as well as technical innovation like context-sensitive hitboxes and the new standard for console multiplayer, until Halo changed the game again in 2001. Alright, my friends, we have reached the number 1 spot on today's best 30 games from the 90s. Did you guess what it was? Some of you, if you know me, you probably guessed it. At number 1, A Legend of Zelda Link to the Past. Legend of Zelda Link to the Past was released for the Super Nintendo in '91. It was met with massive critical and commercial acclaim, as it was the #1 SNES game for more than 5 years. Even today, modern game critics often cite A Link to the Past as one of the greatest games ever made, as it pushed the boundaries of what the Super NES was capable of, with great graphics, an engaging story, smooth gameplay, iconic music, I could go on, and lasting appeal. This is one of the few SNES games that still looks great today. This game aged super well, and I still remember the memories of going through the dungeons and going through the entire world of this game. Bar none, hands down, my favorite game of all time. And there you have it, my friends. That is the top 30 best video games from the 90s. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this format. We can do these from time to time if you like the top 30. I had a lot of fun with it. We got to visit a lot of games. If you guys have any future ideas for top 10s or top 30s, there's a link in the description if you guys want to go submit your ideas. Who knows? It could end up being on the channel. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed. Let me know what your favorite game of the 90s was, and I'll see you on the next video.